Sometimes you listen good enough and long enough, and they'll kind of write the ad for you.
Hey podcast listener, you're about to discover insider tips, tricks, and secrets to making more sales and converting more prospects into customers with email marketing. For more information about the Email Marketing Podcast or the Autoresponder Guide, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Okay, it's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy, and it's time for episode 44 of the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, where you'll discover tactics and strategies to increase your email profits by 25 to 100% in 90 days or less. And that's the purpose of today. Today I'll be talking to David Deutsch. He is one of the top copywriters in the world, and we got on the phone together to talk about email marketing and what he's doing to get a great results with it. Okay, so we're going to talk about the slippery slope of email marketing, how to basically use your emails to create a slippery slide from opening that email all the way to buying the product. Now, I've talked about this before, but now you're going to get one of the best copywriters in the world, his perspective on how to do this. We're also going to talk about hot buttons. So you're going to hear about how to really get inside your prospect's brain, how to hack into your prospect's brain so you can really understand what you need to say to him or her to get results, right? Because marketing and copywriting is less about tricks and special tactics and all that, and more just about having the most extreme empathy, having better empathy than anyone else in the market so that you can solve the problems better than anyone else. So you'll hear about that in this episode, and basically what David's doing these days with email marketing, what's working for him, and he's doing some very interesting stuff. To get the show notes for this episode of the Email Marketing Podcast, go to themcmethod.com/44. Now, one thing before we get into it, I wanted to ask you for a quick favor, and I'm not big on favors, but I would love it if you could go to iTunes and search for the Email Marketing Podcast and leave me a review. Now, these reviews help me get the word out about the show. They help other people hear about the Email Marketing Podcast. I know you don't want your competitors to hear about this stuff, but at least share it with your friends. At least, let me know how I'm doing so I can continue to make this show better for you and solve more of your problems, okay? That's all you have to do that is go to iTunes and search for the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast. Now, before we get into it, I have one listener question. The question is how to attract good clients on a long-term basis, or how do I attract good clients on a long-term basis? So this is a great question. Now, when I first got into this, I thought the secret was just the best marketing. If you had the best marketing, the best copy, the best website, you would get the best clients. And that's sort of true. I mean, you do need to have good marketing. But there are two parts to this coin. There is the product. And in your case, when you're a copywriter or some sort of service provider where you have clients, the product is the work that you do. Now, you can have great marketing, but if you don't have a good product, you might not have results, no case studies, no trust, no rapport with the industry, it's going to be hard to get good clients. Okay? If you have the best product and zero marketing, you're not going to get these clients either. So what you really need to do, this podcast is mainly about how to be great at email marketing. So how to market yourself and also how to be really good at email marketing as well. So if you're going to do this with clients, just for how to attract good clients, yeah, you've got the emails and you need to have all that stuff. But I think the most important thing now, and this has kind of changed me over the last few months and how I've thought about it, is that you need to have chops. You need to have skills. You need to know what you're doing. You need to be able to get results. If you can get results, the marketing will be fairly easy. People are going to refer you. People are going to talk about you. All that stuff's fairly straightforward, especially if you listen to this podcast. You're going to have tons of ideas for how to market yourself with email, with your website, with landing pages, with copy, all that sort of stuff. But you have to be able to get results. If you cannot get results, or if you haven't gotten any results yet, it's going to be hard to get good clients. As for how to do it on a long-term basis, just do really good work, right? Because marketing, you can bring in a client with good marketing, good sales skills on the phone or whatever, something like that. But you're not going to be able to keep those clients, and they're not going to refer you unless you have a good product, okay? So it bears repeating, and that's why I keep going on about this. Let's say you bring in a client. You do really good work. He's going to keep referring people to you. This is how I got started. When I first started, I did an autoresponder for someone, and after that, they recommended me to a few people, and then they recommended me to a few more people, and it became kind of like a pay it forward thing. Everyone referred me to a couple more people, and it just grew from there. That's how I got started. So I might have had the website, and that's what everyone saw, but the real business, the real marketing was being done by me doing good work and getting people to refer other people to me, right? So that's just a little bit of a wrap on that. I hope that helps. I did repeat myself a few times there, but it bears repeating. You have to be good at what you do. You have to be able to get results. That is key. Okay? Now, that's it for now. Let's get into this interview with David Deutsch and talk about the slippery slope of email marketing. It's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy. I'm here with David Deutsch, frequently referred to as one of the top direct response marketing consultants and copywriters in the country. David's copy has sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of clients' products, and this includes everything from books, seminars, newsletters, Maxwell House Coffee, and Uniroyal Tires. His advertising career started at the renowned Ogilvy & Mather advertising agency on Madison Avenue. He's worked with all types of companies from Fortune 500 companies such as Merrill Lynch, General Foods, American Express, to small businesses and entrepreneurs. But these days, he's mostly writing for and consulting with companies who sell information and advice in print. So this is, in print, online, and through seminars. So we're going to talk about, today we're going to talk about how he's applying all the skills he's developed to email marketing, but we're going to take a bit of a broader look at the marketing process as a whole. So it's going to be very interesting. David, how are you today?
I'm great. It's finally warmed up here.
I've been telling people the same thing here in Thailand, but warm up here is like from 25 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. It's gone from warm to hot, basically.
I just wish I was there in Thailand now. So
let's before we get into the email marketing stuff and the marketing as a process, maybe tell the listener a little bit more about you and maybe a bit more about what you're doing, what you've been doing lately.
Well, I started out in traditional advertising, as you said, at Ogilvy and Mather, working at an ad agency. Worked at various ad agencies, and then discovered direct mail, basically through Jay Abraham. Was kind of taken with him and his philosophy about marketing and the accountability of marketing and direct response. And started working I work a lot with publishers of books and newsletters and things like that, information publishers. But as you said, I've also worked with bunches of different big companies and little companies, online, in print, and of course these days more and more is online.
Okay. So I'm curious, what specifically have you been doing online? Just email, sales letters, or the whole thing?
Well, the whole thing. Yeah, I as we've discussed before, I see it as kind of an overall process of developing a sales letter, developing the emails that lead people to that sales letter, developing the emails maybe that affiliates use. All those things kind of go together. Banner ads.
Okay. I like this idea, and we were just talking about this before, but I'm sure there's some people who are going to be listening to this who will think about email marketing, or even just email, building a list on an email in isolation as though it's something you just use on its own. But what you're talking about is that it's really just it's one piece of the puzzle, and that if you've got all these different pieces like banner ads and affiliates and JVs and email marketing and paid traffic like Facebook ads and Google ads and all these different things, but there's something that ties the whole thing together. So that's, maybe you call that the big picture. How do you explain that high-level overview of what's important when you're looking at the whole thing as a process?
Well, I guess, to me, the thing that ties it together, to me as a writer, the thing that ties it together is, the concept behind it, the idea behind it. In other words, for instance, what hot buttons are you hitting? And if you know what works, what people respond to, then that should ideally manifest itself in your emails as well as in your landing page. One interesting thing to me, I guess, is how you can use emails, internet marketing for testing things. In other words, it takes a long time to write a sales letter, and you like to know, okay, what are the hot buttons that people are interested in? Well, sometimes you can use emails to kind of test out what hot buttons people are interested in. You send an email and you push this hot button and they don't respond to that very much. So you try it again, maybe a different subject line.
Yep.
And then you see, they really respond to this subject line. They really respond to this kind of content in the email. So let me write this. When I write the sales letter, then I know I should feature that in the headline. I know I should feature that in my presentation.
Okay. I think this is really important, that the idea that before you sit down to write a word of copy or write a landing page or write emails or think about the autoresponder or the launch or whatever it happens to be, that whoever's doing it, the entrepreneur or the copywriter, they have to take the time to get an idea about what problems they're actually solving. What are the pain points? Right.
I think that's the main thing is what's the pain point. Okay. And how is it that your product or service or whatever it is, how is it that you can help with that?
Okay. Well, what I'm interested in is, I find this a fascinating topic, because I've found as I've practiced copywriting and studied it, it's that once you get a good idea of how to actually write the copy, the big win after that is
spending a large amount of your time, if not the majority of your time, on just identifying the hot buttons. And then after you've done all that, then the copy just will write itself. So it's that once you get the basic, once you get some decent chops down, that the most important part is really taking the time to understand these hot buttons. So if someone's listening and they want to go and do this, they want to go and find out these hot buttons, they probably have some idea already because they're familiar with the market. They've done a little bit of research. What do you suggest to people who would want to go and find out these hot buttons?
Well, I think the main thing is one of the main things, I guess, is to talk to people who you're writing to. Talk to the typical prospect and see what kind of things come up.
Okay.
See what kind of things come up, or when you start talking about my product does this, does that generate a response in them? Do they seem excited about that? Do they want to know more? What is it that gets their attention?
Okay. I'm curious, when you were back on Ogilvy Mather and doing a lot of the writing then, what sort of tricks or strategies did you use to figure out these hot buttons?
Well, when I was at Ogilvy, of course, they had a very sophisticated market research department. They did focus groups. So they got typical prospects in a room talking about how they relate to the product. And, you could see from that, because it's, hot buttons is one part of it. And another part of it, I think, is talking about the problem and the solution in the vocabulary that people who are prospects use.
Okay.
In other words, if you're talking to people, let's say, that have arthritis, then they talk about arthritis pain in a certain way. There's certain things that happen when you have arthritis. For instance, it's hard to open a door. Just twisting on a door handle could be, very painful. So if you don't have arthritis, that might not be something that you would think to even talk about when you talk about the pain of arthritis. But if you do talk about it, then they kind of go, oh, this is a person that kind of knows how it is. This is a person that knows what I'm going through.
Right. Okay. So, but if someone doesn't have that, they don't have sophisticated research firms or focus groups or anything like that, what are some ways that they can, get these kind of insights? Are you telling them to, say, calling up a prospect and interviewing them? Yeah,
calling and interviewing, going to see them. If it's a general enough product, you can talk to your friends if there are people that might use it. The other thing nowadays that's so nice is that you've got on the internet, you've got forums, you've got people talking that you can listen in on.
Yep.
On the internet and see what kind of conversations they're having about this product or service or whatever it is you're writing about.
And so people should be looking for the specific ways in which their prospects are talking. So kind of look for phrases and kind of like slang. I know exactly what you mean. I'm trying to figure out how to describe it properly for the listener. But the idea is that you've got to go out there and you've got to get the prospect talking. So it's not so you can hear how that conversation is going on in that head, including the words they're using to describe their problem. Like about that door, and that say arthritis. People with arthritis, they're all having the same kind of experience. But unless you have arthritis, it's going to be very hard, or someone who has, it's going to be very hard to know exactly what those experiences are. But if you can find out what they are and then put them into the same words and describe them in the same way that the 80-year-old down the road describes it to her friends at bingo, if you can describe it like that in the sales letter, in the emails, in all the marketing, it just clicks, it resonates, doesn't it?
Yes, it absolutely does. And if it doesn't, then you seem like a fraud. And the more specialized the market or industry or whatever, the easier it is to seem like you don't really know what you're talking about, or you're not one of us.
Right. You're just a marketer or an advertiser trying to sell something.
Yeah, you're just trying to sell me something. Exactly.
Okay. So you've spoken to people, you've spoken to prospects before. You've done this before, right?
Right.
Okay. Right. So what are there any do you have a go-to question? Maybe 3 go-to questions that you would ask someone. You're on the phone. Maybe you met them for coffee. I don't know the exact scenario, but how do you guide this conversation? How do you personally guide it? Yeah, and dive into how do you get info? How do you get the insights like this idea that opening a door with arthritis is very hard?
Well, I think, there's a couple of things. One is that you want to talk to them about their pain. And with arthritis, that's very literal. But with someone else, if you're selling a service to businessmen or something, you want to talk about the pain. What is it that they're looking for your product or service to solve? So what are they annoyed? What are they bothered by? What frustrates them? You want to know what keeps them up at night. What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of happening? What do they worry is going to happen? And then conversely, what do they dream about happening? What do they want to happen? What does success look like to them? For the arthritis person, being pain-free. For the business person, what does success in that business look like, especially in terms of whatever it is your product or service does?
Right.
What does a typical day look like for them? That's where the turning the door handle thing comes in. What happens? What do they do? What do they spend their days doing? And then you can kind of position your product or service more and more in terms of who they are and what they do. So I think that's a real good thing to ask about. And then what have they tried? What products, services, what have they tried to overcome this pain or solve this problem that you can solve for them? Because you want to also position your product in relation to other possible solutions.
Okay, and understand where it fits. I think the really interesting thing about this is that copywriting and marketing, it's a very creative, endeavor where you're producing something. But the secret to doing it well is actually you start by listening, not by writing something down.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true. Sometimes you listen good enough and long enough, and they'll kind of write the ad for you. Between talking to the prospect and talking to the client, if you're working for a client, if you're working for yourself, you have to kind of talk to yourself in a certain way and interview yourself. And that may sound kind of funny in a way, but you really can kind of carry on a dialogue with yourself in terms of questions that you ask yourself.
Yeah.
The best marketers, the best thinkers that I know are people that ask themselves questions.
Okay. I mean, I will admit that sometimes when I have a problem, I will go for a walk and I will talk to myself out somewhere when no one can hear me. I will go and talk to myself as I walk. And strangely, I find it's a really effective way to solve problems, because it's almost that by speaking the thought out loud, it forces me to express it in a certain way, and then that leads me naturally to the solution. Whereas sometimes it's easy to become jumbled up in your head.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I think also, we could have a whole 2-hour conversation about thinking and all that, but it's hard to get your brain engaged. It's hard to really make yourself think. When you talk, be it out loud or to yourself or whatever, it really forces you to think something through. I think that's great that you talk to yourself.
That's good to know. I hope the listener doesn't think I'm too crazy.
The rest of the world may think you're crazy, but I don't.
You know what? I've actually seen. Oh, maybe this is just a cop out, but I swear there's a study out there that says smart people talk to themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's why. We could laugh, but I think the truth of the matter is that talking to yourself engages your thinking and your thought process. I mean, I don't know about you, but I start thinking about how I'm going to solve a problem. And if I'm just sort of thinking about it, pretty soon I'm thinking about what's for lunch and what's for dinner and what I'm going to do. And,
right.
maybe I should watch something on, maybe I should check out this website.
Yep.
But if you're sitting there talking to yourself, you're keeping yourself on track.
Absolutely. That's a great point, because you can be thinking or you can be thinking. Like thinking can be just vague, and you can just sit there and your thoughts float around like clouds, or you can do that really focused thinking, and it's the focused thinking which actually solves these kind of problems.
Let me turn that a little bit too toward copywriting, which is, I think that copywriting to me is basically, it's talking. You're talking to the prospect.
Yep.
And I think one thing that people can do as they're trying to write things is really just to talk it out loud, talk it to other people, try and sell the product or service to other people. Just like how you generate good thinking, that's also how you generate good copy, is just what happens when you try to sell it to someone? What happens when you try to pretend you're selling it to someone? What do you say?
Yep.
It's a little awkward at first to do that, but it's a great technique for generating the words that you should be putting on the page or on the screen.
I like the idea of setting recording yourself as you do that, because that's sometimes it's those spontaneous thoughts, that just pop out of the brain, pop into the brain, that end up being some of the best parts of the copy.
Right, exactly. And that kind of getting back to, you were talking about, this is just really looping around, but when you were talking about interviewing people, and again, I think this applies to interviewing the prospects or interviewing clients that you're working for. I think it's really important to be kind of open-ended, just like you are with these interviews.
Yeah.
And just get people talking, because, if you just get people talking, they'll eventually say the most profound, useful things that they wouldn't have thought to bring up on their own, or you might not have gotten out through questions.
Right.
Preferably over a few drinks too is always helpful.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, that when you start, if you go into to an interview like this, when you're talking with the prospect with a preconceived notion or ideas in your head about how the prospect is or what they should care about or what they do care about, it'll, without, this is to the listener, without you noticing, it's going to make you ask certain questions in certain ways, which will almost lead the prospect into talking about things and maybe even confirming what you're saying. So that's another thing, is like you say, like, don't kind of give up, or leave your expectations at the door and go into it, and just go in to discover. Because unless you've spoken to these prospects before, and unless you've taken some time to understand them, you're going to have a bunch of assumptions. And what you really want to do is go in there and test those assumptions, instead of thinking, well, no, it's an assumption, it's definitely true. You go in and you test it, because maybe it's not true.
Right. And maybe there's an assumption that you haven't thought of.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something that's not one of your assumptions that you want to bring out, and you need to give them the chance to have the chance to uncover that.
Okay. So moving that back to copywriting and marketing, once you've done this, let's say you've spoken to a bunch of different prospects and you've done all the things we've just talked about, what's next? How do you, because I've told so many people to do this type of thing, and I think it's pretty simple, but I think a lot of people struggle with this. First, with just getting the idea that they have to go out there and talk to their prospects before they write copy. But what's next? How do you convert these kind of insights into powerful, persuasive copy and marketing?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, as we talked about, just what would you say to someone to convince them to buy your product or service based on what you've learned, about what they want, what their pain is, what they're looking for. Sitting across from someone that you just met in a bar, what would you say? What would you say to get, like, Joe, there's a way that you can, cure your arthritis pain by using an herb that you find in your backyard. And the other is, and that's a little more open-ended, and that's good for kind of generating some good raw material. And then the other is, there's not but a dozen or so different ways of presenting an idea in an ad or in a letter. There's a straightforward kind of a sell. This can do this. Here's how it works. You could ask a question. You can promote a challenge you can challenge the reader. Isn't it time you got rid of your arthritis pain or whatever? You can highlight how to do something without something, how to cure arthritis without drugs, how to make, more money in your business without working harder. If you look through ads, if you really study ads, if you study copywriting, you see that there are certain templates, certain formulas that you can use. So just try running stuff through those templates, just like I just did with arthritis or, making money. Okay. And, don't be slavish about it. Don't, steal another ad word for word, but just see what happens when you kind of use that template, that general format, that general way of presenting an idea, that general way of selling someone on something.
I think this is a bit like, everyone's been, 3 or 4 years old or 8 years old, and we can't all remember it, but we've all been in that position where we want something from our mom or our dad, and they don't want to give it to us, but we've got a plan. We know how we can manipulate them, or essentially just sell them on giving us what we want. Maybe we want a day off from school, so we do something to get them to give us a day off because we know what their hot buttons are. We understand our parents so well, even at that age, that we know intuitively how to get them to do what we want them to do. All kids know this. So it's a bit like that when if you didn't understand your parents and you didn't really know them very well, it might be very, very hard to do this. You wouldn't be able to push their buttons. But when you've taken the time, this is just like with the marketing. If you don't understand these people with arthritis, it's going to be the same. You can't push the buttons if you can't see them. But if you take the time to go there and find out what all those buttons are, when you finally sit down at a sales letter and with a general idea of what you want to say, it's all just you're going to be like that kid, who knows exactly what buttons to press and exactly what will probably work. And then
exactly.
It's just a matter of testing.
One parent, might be really into, their kid learning more about culture. So that kid might have to say, Dad, wouldn't it be great if I stayed home and went to a museum today instead of going to school? And another dad may want their kid to be, responsible and earn money. So the kid might say, Dad, I want to stay home from school today so I can, cut the neighbor's yard and earn some money or figure out how to do a business online. That's where knowing your parent, knowing your customer, knowing your prospect comes in, because one approach, that approach isn't going to work to the other parent. The staying home and making money isn't going to work for the parent that's into their kid being cultured. And the stay home and go to a museum, take off from school and going to a museum isn't going to work for the parent that wants their kid to be responsible and make money. It's the same thing with to prospects. If you're not talking to them in terms of what they want, their hot buttons, you're wasting so much.
I would say some people too, they get stuck in inside their head thinking that, I'm not sure, I mean, I've been there and I've done this, and I think everyone's probably been there at some point, but it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that you know what's best for your prospect, just like a parent thinks they know what's best for their kids. Just because the parent thinks it's best for their kids doesn't mean that the kid wants to do it or anything like that. So when when someone sits down to write a sales letter or an email or create some marketing, if they go into it thinking, even unconsciously thinking, that someone should want their product because it's going to help them, or for whatever reason like that, they should want it because it's going to be healthy for them, or because it's going to help them achieve their goal, or all these different things which don't tie into the hot buttons, which is this person's slightly depressed and opening doors, like if you go to that arthritis example, opening doors is really hard. If you can't touch those things, but you're just saying, oh, they should want it without understanding them. I think a lot of people have that problem.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think there's a lot of mistakes people make. I think they either assuming the wrong hot buttons that people have, or not really even thinking through what are the hot buttons, not really knowing what are the hot buttons, but just kind of writing. And that's where, again, that whole thing of talking like you're talking to a prospect comes in, because I think sometimes people just write, they just kind of get words on paper, and they forget that they're really selling to a prospect. They forget that they're really having to convince a skeptical prospect to keep reading you're writing, to keep reading what you're sending them, and to reach into their wallet and buy from you. And that's hard to do with just words. You've got to do that. You've got to have the right hot buttons, emotions. You've got to be pushing the right buttons.
There's an issue here, though, that ties in really well, is that some people think that, people hate sales and they don't want to be sold to and all this stuff like that. And I think that's a load of crap, because everyone has problems and everyone wants solutions to those problems. The job of the marketer or a salesman or a copywriter is to simply remove all the barriers, the limiting beliefs, or whatever's standing in the way of that person going out there and buying the solution to their problem. So if you have the solution to their problem, all you have to do is just knock out those barriers that are stopping them from taking action. Because maybe they don't trust you, or maybe they're not confident enough today, or maybe they feel like they can't afford it. There's all sorts of reasons they might not do it. And if you can just knock those barriers out of the way, someone will just slide down that slippery slope. It's that they'll always buy what they want if you can just, it's kind of like they have that momentum. They're going to buy it. But your job is just to it's just basically a big slippery slope, and that people are always looking for solutions to their problems. And that if you say the right things and figure out exactly what those problems are and how your product really, really solves those problems, then it's a no-brainer. It's basically, if you can give someone what they want in exchange for them giving you something that they consider of lesser value than the solution that you're giving them, they'll buy it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. And it's practically a disservice not to have them buy it, not to do everything you can to convince them. It's interesting. There's almost two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is, here's a person who's bored and has really no interest to start with in what you're doing, and you've got to do everything you can to get their attention and get them interested. And that, assuming that, can be very, very powerful in terms of the state of mind that you're in to write copy. Because we tend to think that someone's going to read what we've written just because we're putting it in front of them. And they're not. They're busy. It's in their inbox with 100 other things. It's basically unlikely they're going to read what you've written. But you bring up something interesting, too, which is, you could almost start from the assumption that if what you have truly is the solution for them, then they're going to want what you have. And from the other point of view, too, you have to not do the things that are going to prevent them from buying what you have, because in a way they want to not buy what you have. They don't want to spend the money. They've been disappointed before, so they're going to be looking for you to say something that's not believable. They're going to be looking for you to say something that indicates that you don't know who they are. And if you can kind of avoid doing all those things, as you said, that slippery slope, they'll keep sliding down that slippery slope.
That's a cool way of framing it up. I like that. How it's almost like, instead of trying to do everything right, just try to not do anything wrong, because they already want what you're having. And if you just don't mess it up, it's kind of like you go on a date and you take a girl out to dinner and she's she's already into you. So it's like if you just don't mess it up at that point, then maybe you'll get married, or maybe you get laid that night, whatever. But the point is that you don't have to do everything right. You just have to not do anything wrong.
Yeah, it's a real good point. And it's really easy to do things wrong in copy. It's really easy to, I mean, you said people don't like sales kind of things. And, that's true in a way. It depends on how you define sales. I mean, they don't like salesy, hypey, obvious kind of plays at manipulating them. But, they do enjoy a good story. They do enjoy being sold by a good salesman. They just don't like to feel like they're being unfairly manipulated. Yeah, if you can avoid that, if you can, build trust and bond with them and not say things that are going to make them, put down the ad or not buy or delete your email, then, you're halfway there.
Absolutely.
And it's, it's a good way to kind of look. These are all, in a way, ways of looking through your copy after you've written it and saying, okay, at what point do I lose the reader? At what point does he start not believing? At what point is he going to say this is bullshit? At what point do I say something that tips my hand that I'm just being too much of a salesman here?
Yeah, I've seen. I know people who've done that with. And you probably do too, where you basically take a sales letter and you watch someone read it and you see what their eyes. I mean, you can do this with software on websites with eye testing or heat tracking. I think it's called.
Right.
But so you can check where people fall off, how far down the page they get. When they get confused.
Yeah, no, definitely. You can do it by giving it to them to read, or you can read it aloud to them.
Yep.
And just see where they start wandering off and getting bored. Eventually, too, you've got to have kind of an internal censor for that kind of thing. You've got to be able to read your own copy, and see where, almost like you're playing the reader, almost like you kind of, like by method acting, you become the prospect.
Right.
So where do you lose him?
Right. Okay. This has been very interesting. A bit of a meander through how to research and how to really, because I think this is extremely important stuff. And if people get this right, everything else just flows. It's kind of like everyone wants the tactics. Everyone wants to hear about great subject lines and great emails and how to make a ton of money and all those kind of things, those shiny objects. But the really, really important stuff that's going to lay a foundation for just all the other stuff is what we've talked about today. That it can be a little bit dry, maybe a bit boring. I hope it hasn't been boring, but this is where everything else comes from. This is that piece that ties all the other pieces together.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting when you talk about tactics and all that stuff, which has its place. But I remember realizing once, in talking to a lot of the writers that I've admired over the years, and I'd want to know what tactics and strategies they used and what their secrets were. And it struck me that in talking to them a lot of the time, that they didn't talk about strategies and tactics and things like that. They talked about the market. They talked about where the market was going and what people were thinking and what they were reacting to and what their hot buttons were, and how things were changing and how they were becoming more sophisticated, or how they were looking for this instead of that.
Yep.
And eventually I realized that was really their secret, was not that they knew more strategies and tactics and ways of doing things, but they just had this passion for understanding their market and almost like an empathetic kind of approach to it.
And I love this idea that you can't, it's about the market, like as entrepreneurs, that we have to serve what the market wants. You can't go into the marketplace and convince people to buy what they don't want. It's just not how the free market works. People take their money and they spend it elsewhere. So it's that all trade, this is getting real deep now, but all trade, or barter, where you exchange some form of value for another form of value, that's only ever going to happen if on a free market, if someone wants it. So that's why it's so much more important, rather than looking at, crazy cool ad strategies and copywriting tactics and all that stuff, that just look at the market. What does the market want? And then you just give them what they want. It's like Gary Halbert's, how the single advantage, I think he mentioned, it's the only advantage he'd want is a starving crowd. You have that. The rest is easy.
Yeah, exactly. I think Gene Schwartz, too, said, that all we're doing is channeling desire. We're not creating it.
Yes.
You've got to channel what's already there.
I like that. Okay, I think let's end on that. But before we go, tell people, I don't know if you do coaching or anything like that, but where can people learn more about you if they want to learn more?
Okay. Yeah. No, I do a lot of coaching these days.
Okay.
More and more, I enjoy kind of helping other people in their writing, or helping companies work with their copywriters or work on their marketing as a creative director or a copy supervisor. In addition to doing writing, but if I spend the whole day writing, I go a little crazy. So I kind of like to divide that up 50-50 between writing and telling other people what to write. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me or whatever, my website is davidldeutsch.com. And I better spell that out for you. It's David, L, as in Larry, and then Deutsch, DEUTSCH.com.
Great, fantastic. I'll have a link to that in the show notes at themethod.com. Yeah, so people can go to the website, click the link, and go over. And so if they're interested in coaching or consulting, they should. It looks like you do speaking as well. They can just go to your website to the contact page and send you an email, right?
Yeah, and there's a free thing about the ABC copywriting from A to Z. I think is a special report that's free there. So.
Okay, so they can join your list and see how you're applying all these insights to email marketing.
Yep, I get them on my list just like you train people to do, to develop a list. So
okay, just quickly, I'm curious, what do you send out to them? What's your give me a quick rundown. What's your email strategy after someone signs up?
Oh God, don't ask me that. It's like the shoemakers, kids having no shoes. I've got a course on creativity. That I sell on the site, and a series of interviews that I've done with copywriters and copywriting entrepreneurs. So that's on there, but I don't really have a autoresponder, series, and I know that I should. So
okay. Well, if you
so you don't have to worry about being inundated by emails if you sign up for my email list.
Yeah, it's funny because I send people daily emails. So if you want to receive less emails, go and sign up to your list.
I know. I really should do that.
If you want to learn more about email marketing, David, there's a podcast that I know about. Let me know if.
That's a good idea. Good idea. I'll have to listen.
I'll send you a link, man. Thank you. Thanks, David, for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to discover more insider tips, tricks, and secrets about driving sales with email marketing, sign up for daily email tips from the autoresponder guy. Go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Sign up, confirm your email address, and I'll send you daily emails on how to improve your email marketing and make more sales via email. You'll find out why open rates don't matter and the 7-letter word that underlies all effective marketing and much more.
Fire.